Assalamu alaikum. How you going, guys? I'm back again. Ibrahim from Idlib, Syria, live. I apologise. Last week we had some bit of a technical issues, you could say, and this is a standard procedure in a war zone. You have issues with net, you have issues with electricity, many issues that pop up out of nowhere, unexpected, you could say. So I apologise for that. Let's hope we can try to keep online this time. So far, so good. Hopefully things are running smoothly. Let's just do a quick check that everything's running smoothly. How are you guys going? I hope everyone's well. It's been a full-on last week or so. We have interesting events that happen on a regular basis here in Syria and Idlib. Keeps us constantly active, and so just bear with me. We've got a program today, a couple of topics I was hoping to speak about, but some people advise us to try to address questions first, so we can get the questions going, and I think we'll give that priority over the topics which we've proposed, even though the topics are definitely important. We have the two topics that were proposed were Syria, a war of governance, and why are Syrians fleeing Assad's areas. Now there's a lot of, you could say, information, a lot of topics inside of these two main topics, or focus points, you could say. We could speak for hours and hours. I'll try, when we get onto that, I'll try my best to keep it, you could say, keep it up to date and give you as much as information in a small amount of time as I could. We'll see. They're asking, I've got a question that's popped up from that's come up on YouTube. I know the guys, some people may be watching on Twitter, some people may be watching on YouTube. I'll be following up your questions on YouTube and Twitter, inshallah, and we'll try to address as many questions as we can and cover the topics, the focus points covered in Muslita. Please don't forget to share this with your family and friends and people that are interested or have invested in the Syrian arena and the Syrian cause. The Syrian people are struggling and striving hard day by day with their noble cause to achieve their goal, which is freedom and the fall of the Assad regime, to establish a righteous, pious government in Damascus. So look, I'll do my best, like I said, to try to cover the topics. We'll see. Maybe we can get on board. I'll just make sure that our technical side's all sweet, so we don't repeat last week. I don't know how things are going. It seems all good. Bismillah. Okay. We've got a question from Quicksilver 6669. Is it okay for an Aussie to live in a place of war? Thank you for the question. I guess I'm not any better than the Syrian people. I'm not any better than any other people that are living in a war zone. It's definitely a difficult lifestyle, but there's a lot of benefits and a lot of positives as well living in a war zone. And yes, for an Aussie to live in a war zone, if he's doing it for a righteous cause, to defend the oppressed, to seek justice and freedom for the oppressed, then it's definitely alright for an Aussie to be in a war zone. Actually, it will be an honourable cause for him to stand beside the people, and this is my belief, this is what's in my heart, for him to stand by the oppressed people in their cause, whether it be in a war zone, whether it be in any area. If he's doing it for the right cause, then definitely it's okay. I've got a question from Zakaria. Has anything happened in Idlib in the past week? What is the relationship between Idlib and northern Aleppo? Aren't both areas Muslims? MashaAllah, good question, Zakaria. Jazakumullahu khair. Regarding the past week, so there's a couple of questions there. The past week there has been a number of events. In Idlib in particular, the Prime Minister of the Syrian Salvation Government was re-elected in the Shura Council, where there was a vote for him to be re-elected as the Prime Minister for another term, for another year. that was a big event which took place. Now, the Prime Minister, Ali Kida, he's an engineer. He's had a good run for his past period. He's definitely, you could say, managed an emergency environment, a war environment, even though there's been more stability than previous years in the revolution. So we'll see how he goes for this next year. He's definitely got a big task on his hands, and the Syrian people are waiting for him to bring forth some solutions. And we ask Allah to make it easy for him and those that are assisting him. What is the relationship between Idlib and northern Aleppo? They're both, northern Aleppo are Muslims. The majority of them, of the people living in northern Aleppo, are displaced from all over Syria in the revolutionaries, Muslims, Mujahideen, etc. So they're residing in northern Aleppo just like Idlib. So you have a big percentage of people in Idlib or northern Aleppo that are displaced, and they're all pro-revolution. So that's definitely an important factor that resembles the two areas as well. Northern Aleppo, the relationship, you could say it's cooperation. They have similar enemies, similar goals, similar, you could say, situation with regards to the dire situation, economic situation, refugees, camps, displaced, etc. So that's the reality. I mean, their situations are very similar, relationships like a cooperation. I will talk about this a little bit in the whole governance of war, the war of governance in Syria, where I'll try to elaborate a little bit about the situation in Idlib with regards to governance and other areas in Syria, and how governance has become a very important aspect in this war. Aren't both areas Muslims? No. As we mentioned, they are both Muslims. One area is more influenced. It's severely or greatly influenced by Turkey, which is northern Aleppo, militarily, on a civil, military, security level there. And in Idlib, there is a Turkish presence, heavy Turkish presence in Idlib, on the borders with the Assad regime, on the front lines, you could say. But in civil affairs and security affairs, the Turkish presence Turkey has no influence on the civil or the security affairs. It's independently governed in Idlib. And like I said, I'll elaborate on that more, inshallah, in the topic to come. Quicksilver says, be safe, down with Bashar al-Assad. Ameen. I will do my best to be safe, and I will do my best to carry on in my support for the Syrian people and their noble cause, and down with Bashar al-Assad. Zakaria has posed another question. Thank you for that. Why is there issues or differences between Mujahideen? Why don't they all just unite? I think it's an important question again, Zakaria, Jazakumullah khair. The differences between Mujahideen, I think this is blown out of proportion. The differences that show on social media, they don't necessarily represent the reality on the ground. There are Mujahideen, the vast majority of Mujahideen in the liberated areas cooperate and collaborate and work shoulder to shoulder in the liberated areas alongside the Syrian factions like Hayat al-Sham and other factions like Ahrar al-Sham, etc., under the umbrella of Ghurfat Amaliyat al-Fath al-Mubin, the Fath al-Mubin operations room. So the differences that are apparent online, I'd say they don't represent the reality on the ground. Why don't they just unite? Like I mentioned, the vast majority cooperate and work shoulder to shoulder. There are some differences of opinion, some differences between the Mujahideen, but I'd say that'd be very minimal. And the social media does not represent the reality on the ground. It only expresses some of the information which is put up online, and it may be a particular atmosphere that has caused that. And unity, I think, in time, with regards to the factions, Syrians, locals, Ansar, Mujahideen, unity will be achieved, inshallah. I have no doubt in that. The way that this unity may look or appear to the outside world may not be obvious at the moment, but there's definitely a lot of hard work happening behind the scenes, a lot of hard work for that to be achieved, and we can see that on the ground here. You can see that in operations room, you can see that in cooperation, collaboration, etc. that's happening on a regular basis. So this will become more and more apparent, in my opinion, over the next months and years, inshallah. And we ask Allah that it doesn't take long. Sooner rather than later, this gets achieved. We have Ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, akhi. What do you think about Harassad-Din? Look, the Syrian revolution has gone through many cycles. It's gone through many stages. Some people have moved with the stages and matured and developed in a positive way, and some are still stuck in 2014, 2013, 2015. Let's just say that maybe, just to clarify one important thing, as far as that I'm aware and understanding, that Harassad-Din is no longer present in the liberated areas as a faction. It basically fell apart when the coup attempt took place with the umbrella of with the operations room Fethputu, which had a number of bodies which come with it. Of it was Abu Abdul Shiddat and the people that worked with him. Of it was Harassad-Din. Of it was Ansar Islam. I think it was a few other factions here in the liberated areas. They come under the Fethputu umbrella. Now, when this Fethputu umbrella took place, or you could say was established, it definitely caused controversy and big issues in Idlib in particular. And the way that their actions unfolded, it showed that there was intentions to maybe compete with or overrun the other operations room, which was Al-Fath al-Mubin, which is run by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Ahrar al-Sham and other factions here in the liberated areas. So this really brought an environment where it might have drawn the liberated areas back to like 2017, 2016, 2018, where there was internal problems trying to achieve unity in one way or the other, military or political or economic or security unity or civil unity even. So this Fethputu was threatening the unity or the partial unity which was achieved, and it would have drawn back the factions to 2016, 17, where the problems had been breached. So to draw things back to those problems would have caused been disastrous in the liberated areas. After this military attempt in the western part of Idlib, where a number of checkpoints were taken by Harassad-Din, which were Hayat Tahrir al-Sham checkpoints. Many soldiers were killed and many were injured, even homes, etc. It caused big havoc. After that, these checkpoints were retaken by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and Harassad-Din pretty much dissolved. So that's the reality of Harassad-Din. Like I mentioned, I believe that some of the factions, a lot of the people, were stuck in previous cycles or previous stages in the liberated areas that have been breached, that definitely caused a bad environment, caused problems, and may have been the reason why Harassad-Din pretty much fell apart. Allah knows best. Okay, we got a new question. I hope I answered the question, Ali Muhammad. I apologise for it being long, but it's a sensitive one and it's an important one that people understand what really happened, and maybe in the future we can address that in more detail. Allah knows best. We got Zenzi. What does the Majlis Shura do? Okay, the Majlis Shura's role, just so we clarify, it's a body that has representatives from all over the liberated areas. It's called Al-Majlis Al-Shura Al-Am, and it operates in Idlib. Now it's like a higher body than the Syrian Salvation Government, and it's the one that has representatives from all over, similar to a parliament, you could say, has representatives from all over the liberated areas that make up this Shura body. It's approximately 70 people. I mean liberated areas and displaced people. So you have people from Deir ez-Zor, people from Hama, people from Hasaka, people from Homs living here in Idlib. They come part, each one of them brings forth 1 or 2 members, and they make up a shura body. This is a shura council. Now the shura council, they are involved, or they have the responsibility of preparing administrative laws. Administrative laws. Now there's a Majlis Ifta' that's different, separate to Majlis Shura. Majlis Ifta' is responsible for Islamic laws, that it's like brings fatwa for events and affairs that occur in the liberated areas, and you have Majlis Shura al-Am that deals with administrative affairs, and the Syrian Salvation Government is the executive body, you could say, that's responsible for implementing the plans and the laws, etc., administrative laws and services and all this sort of stuff for the Syrian people. So Majlis Shura al-Am, they're the ones that appoint the Prime Minister through a vote. They're the ones that confirm the ministers that will maybe in the next month or so be appointed, and they're responsible for bringing forth solutions, laws, you could say administrative laws for the liberated areas, which will, you could say, help in developing the situation of the Free Syrian people here. God knows best. So that's regarding Al-Majlis Shura al-Am, or the Majlis Shura Council. طيب, we'll see what we got. If we've got any more questions, maybe we can jump on to a topic. We've got a focus point: Syria, a war of governance. Now, what I've tried to this point, Syria war of governance, the way things have developed in Syria, where Assad regime isn't the only body governing. Even at one stage, he was just about to fall in 2015. So other bodies took in the void, or filled the void of governance. So you have 4 areas in Syria now that are governed by separate governments. You have Idlib, the Syrian Salvation Government, which governs Idlib and parts of western Aleppo. You have in northern Aleppo the interim government. And that is, the Syrian Salvation Government Idlib has a military body, you could say, that protects the areas militarily. That's Operations Room and Fath al-Mubin. So you have the Syrian Salvation Government and Fath al-Mubin. And you have other institutions that operate in cooperation. Many humanitarian aid organizations operate in cooperation with the Syrian Salvation Government in Idlib. You got northern Aleppo, the interim government. Now, interim government, a very important point, its base is in Turkey. And it has a decentralized system where it governs northern Aleppo, Afrin, Jinderes, Bab, and the Nabas Salam, the Peace Spring operations in eastern part. I think it's the eastern part, more east of of Al-Bab. So these 3 areas, they're basically northern Aleppo. That's what we mean by northern Aleppo, the interim government. Interim government supported and backed strongly by the Turkish government, and on the ground Turkey have influence. So that's basically the northern Aleppo. They also have they call it the National Army, which is a number of factions that operate in northern Aleppo. That's basically their military wing. You have in the eastern side of Syria, which is the Anonymous Administration of Northeastern Syria. And that is the area which is known as, or you could say the military ring there, is the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces. They're predominantly Kurdish. But there are many Kurds that are not with them. Let's clarify. Our Muslim brothers, the Kurdish Muslim brothers in the eastern part of Syria that are not with SDF, there are many of them that are not with SDF. You also have in their areas many people that are, you could say, Bedouins or Arab tribes. They are in large parts of the SDF or the autonomous administration's areas. Many people that reside there are Arabs, and they are tribes. And they don't necessarily cooperate or deal with the SDF. A lot of them have issues there, and we'll come on that a little bit in a moment. And then you have the Assad regime. Like I mentioned, the Assad regime, it doesn't necessarily govern on its own. It is strongly and heavily backed, as everyone knows, the whole world knows, by Russia, and strongly and heavily backed by Iran, as well as Hezbollah, the Lebanese militia, Iranian-backed Lebanese militia, as well as tens of thousands of militias that are backed by either Russia, Wagner, Iran, which is from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from all over Asia, and then you have as well Hezbollah, which is the Lebanese militia. So that's the four areas, like I mentioned. Now these areas, they do have important factors, you could say, and this is where it comes in. The Syrian people, a lot of the Syrian people now displaced half of the population. So you have Syrian people, many of them living in tents, living in refuge. Over 80% of the Syrian people live below the poverty line. So you have a dire situation, a high need of governance, or you could say filling the void of governance, a high need for this to serve the Syrian people. So this is where it's become, you could say, important that the Assad regime, you could say, promotes himself to be the only government capable of managing or governing Idlib, Syria. But there has been other examples established, and they're developing, like in Idlib, that it's establishing itself and promoting itself as well as a replacement for the Assad regime. Now you have northern Aleppo. Like I said, it's heavily influenced by the Turkish government and supported by the Turks. You even have like majalis mahalli, or city councils in northern Aleppo, approximately 10. Some of them have direct links to governors in Turkey. So the governors deal with the city council directly, not through the main government, which is the interim government. So that some Turkish governors directly contact and deal with and support the city councils. This shows how much of a decentralized situation there is in northern Aleppo. In addition to that, you have factions who semi-control, or you could say in most ways control each little area. Now Idlib was like that in 2017, 2016, where you had factions, each faction was controlling a particular area, and then gradually, like I said, there was a huge struggle and problems between the factions. People call it internal fighting, etc., for a number of years, maybe about 18 months to 2 years. This gradually, when it stopped in the start of 2019, this is where they become a centralized or unified government, unified security, unified military body gradually developed, which is Fath al-Mubin. This is where things develop in Idlib, in contrary to northern Aleppo, where northern Aleppo, like I said, is still decentralized. You have the factions running their thing, you have the city councils running their thing independently or semi-independently. They don't get much support from the central government, which is the interim government, which is based in Turkey. So there are differences here. Idlib's independent, northern Aleppo is strongly influenced by Turkey. So Idlib's promoting itself to be a replacement for the Assad regime in the future, and it has developed the infrastructure, you could say. And this is apparent. Even though there are cracks and problems and obstacles, the infrastructure has been established in Idlib so that it can be, and it can promote itself to be a replacement for the Assad regime. You have also the autonomous administration. Now this, they call it Rojava. Now Rojava, you could see the political atmosphere here, where Rojava means the western or west. Now it's one part of four parts of the Kurdish state, which the SDF and the PKK and the PYD are promoting and trying to establish, which is an independent Kurdish state. Now this Kurdish state that they're trying to promote or trying to establish, part of it is in Syria, part of it is in Iraq, and part of it is in Turkey. And I think even part of it's in Iran. So you could see all these countries are going to have big problems with the Kurdish state trying to be established, and you can see the serious problems happening between Turkey and the PKK or the SDF on a regular basis, and that their war is heated, and Turkey's constantly promoting that it will wipe the PKK out and they will liberate those areas. God knows what will happen there. So the relationship between autonomous administration and the people there in the east of Euphrates, the vibe is not a vibe, or you could say the insijam, which is the integration between the SDF and the local tribes, is very bad. You could see that regularly riots, protests, problems happening. The tribes don't want, many of them don't want to deal with the SDF or the autonomous administration. So that's basically the reality, and I believe that'll be the cause for that autonomous administration to fall apart. I don't see it having a future. And you can see America's about to pull out. They straight away lost ground to Turkey. They've tried to maybe negotiate with Assad, and they fought Assad, negotiate with the Russians, and they fought the Russians. They're constantly waving right and left, non-stable. And the project itself, I don't see it having a future in Syria. You have the Assad regime. Now the Assad regime fell apart in 2015. Institutions all fell apart. He was on the brink of collapse. So here come in the Russians, come in the Iranians to revive him, or to bring him back from death. So the Assad regime is living on, you could say, living on a life support. Russia leaves, automatically will fall apart. And we've seen an example, like the Americans left in Afghanistan. The Afghan government fell apart in moments, in front of the whole world's eyes. And the second topic I've got, why are Syrians leaving Assad's areas? You can see the Syrians, you have millions of people, Syrians living outside of Assad's areas, won't go back, and you have people rushing to leave Assad's areas today, and they'll sell their homes, sell their lands just to leave. So the situation in Assad's areas, I'd say, it's direct link to Russia and Iran, etc., and it's living on life support. Its future is not clear. I strongly believe that the future for Syria and this war of governance will be won by the revolution. I think it will be won by an independent project run by the Syrian people, established by the Syrian people, for the Syrian people, for their own interests, or for their own interests. And I strongly believe this war will be won by the revolution in the future, and we ask God to assist the Syrian people in their noble cause, to achieve justice. So that's basically my opinion regarding that topic, or this focus point. We'll see if we've got any questions that have popped up since our... Okay. We've got a question. Omer. Barakallahu feek. لو موجود ترجمة على كل حال بارك الله فيك بجهودكم. Wallahi, I've been asked many times by Syrians online, and even here on the ground, Syrians, I've met with them, people that are living here, translate your work. So I will try my best, brother Amar. Inshallah, سأحاول قدر المستطاع لأترجم المواد، وخاصة البث المباشر أو البرنامج هذه. إن شاء الله في المستقبل القريب سنقوم بجهودنا إن شاء الله قدر المستطاع نقوم بذلك. جزاكم الله خير أخي عمر. I've got a question. I've got Sasha Fierce. He says, hey, why is it that the Turkish-backed controlled areas, which is heavily funded by Turkey, always having infighting issues? It seems there are many groups there causing all sorts of issues. None of us, I'd say, or the revolution generally, when any form of problems happen between factions or infighting, you could say, it causes qalaq, unrest. This is an atmosphere, an environment that people don't like to live in. You see Muslims fighting each other, killing each other, etc. This is not a good environment. I'd say that a big problem that causes this in northern Aleppo, it's the decentralized disunity. And so this unity, brother, is a big cause for this infighting. So you have, he took from me my right, I took from him his right, etc. Everyone seems to be their own sultan or their own leader, authority. So the authority wants to try to deal with another authority as though they're on the same level. So this unity causes big problems in society between the factions, and the factions' interference in civil affairs, economic affairs, security affairs. This causes big problems. In Idlib, we witnessed this over many, many years, and you see now that HTS, for example, other factions here are stepping away, concentrating on their military work, and other institutions are being developed, like the security forces here, like the checkpoints here. They're being developed in more of a civil fashion, not linked directly to a military body or factions. They're you could say trying to address things in more of a civil fashion, like the government here, on the ground government, which is the Syrian Salvation Government's headquarters is in Idlib, on the ground here. Their ministers are in Idlib, the Prime Minister's in Idlib. So they're governing on the ground with their own hands, with their own affairs. As you see in my video yesterday, I visited one of the hospitals that was established, had a grand opening. The Prime Minister himself came and opened the hospital up, as well as some ministers. So the factions will fight each other as long as there's a disunity, and that's a big obstacle. And I don't believe that this will stop until unity is achieved. I don't mean unity is that everyone's one faction and one body. That might be a little bit far-fetched. At least under one umbrella, having a unified political body, unified, it might be joint, but unified Islamic body, unified fatwa, unified government, unified military umbrella, unified security services, etc. And that's where we'll breach these issues between factions. Allah knows best. I've got a question by Zanzi again. Can we have a final merger soon in Idlib with all groups? There has been, I don't think, because this was attempted in the establishment of Hayat Tahrir Sham itself. Hayat Tahrir Sham in Idlib, it was an attempt to unify the factions. The more successful example was Jaysh al-Fatah, where there was an umbrella. People had some sort of independence, but the unified military efforts. This brought far more fruits than the Hayat Tahrir Sham attempt. So I think a military umbrella, a political umbrella, a security umbrella, and there's some sort of joint efforts. This may be more reasonable, more realistic. A strongly unified body. Maybe in the future, when Damascus is taken, this will be achieved. There are pros in having an umbrella with factions under it. This umbrella is what brings them together, is what unifies them. I think that'll be more of a realistic solution. Allah knows best. I've got Alqay Plays Gaming. Thank you for your question. How did you learn English so well? I love your accent, by the way. Jazakallah khair, thanks for that compliment. It's an Aussie accent. I'm Arab originally, but I was raised in Australia. So as you can see, I've got an Australian accent. I play cricket, I love cricket. I play soccer, not football, soccer. I love shrimp on the barbie. So that's my accent, and that's my background. But I am Arab, Lebanese, and proud Lebanese, alhamdulillah. I love Bilad al-Sham, and this is my language, my religion, Islam. My language is Arabic, as well as English, which I learned in Australia. So thanks for that compliment. I've got Sonic Ryu. Okay, wish you all the best, mate. Love what you're doing. Jazakallah khair, Sonic Ryu. I appreciate that. I've got Al-Fatih. Has the infrastructure in Idlib improved over the past few years? Look, people might see me as leaning or bias or exaggerate, but on the ground, and when fine details are researched and studied, and when you follow up the institutions that are being established, leave aside the controversial accounts and personalities that try to blacken everything in Idlib. There are many Russian disinformation campaigns, people that have hatred in their heart, people that are jealous, people that have been oppressed maybe. May God forgive those who oppressed, and may God help those who were oppressed to achieve justice. These sort of environments have caused people to try to blacken Idlib. But when you look at it from a fair vision, out of the square, you could say, with fairness, insaf, you could say, insaf in Arabic, fairness in your heart and in your mind, and leave all these other emotional points aside, you'll find that there has been an establishment of infrastructure, whether it be administrative services, roads, projects like in what's being established in Ariha, the new big hospital in Ariha, which is there, challenging the world, challenging Russia, challenging the Assad regime. You have the city, the factories, or the city that's being established in Bab al-Hawa for factories. There are projects and there are institutions, like I said, even the hierarchy itself of the liberated areas and the institutions that are being established here. This is the infrastructure. So when you have this infrastructure there, you have the bodies in place, you have the civil and bodies being established, etc., like Majlis Shura, like Syrian Salvation Government, like Majlis al-Ifta, like the Zakah, amazing project as Zakah, where it's transferring money from the rich and then bringing it forth to the poor in a war zone. Wallahi, amazing. One of the 5 pillars of Islam. It's a tough project. People don't necessarily understand it needs tathqif. Even those who are working in this project maybe are becoming more mature day by day. And they're learning day by day. You don't have a blueprint. They don't have a blueprint, akhi. Think about it. We don't have a blueprint in Idlib where the project that's being established here can just copy and paste it. There's no blueprint to establish an Islamic project in a war zone under this political, military, social, economical, security environment. So you're learning, you're maturing day by day, establishing on a hierarchy. Your hierarchy is being developed on a horizontal level and on a vertical level. Every day you see new institutions being established, popping up here and there. Let's hope that doesn't cause bureaucracy, where that's a big disease in the Arab world. So let's hope that doesn't get caused by all these institutions, etc. But that's infrastructure. That's important infrastructure. Is developing these people, developing the mindset, developing the spirit to carry on, as well as the organisational, the economic services, etc. As I mentioned, Allah knows best. Okay, I've got Sasha Fis. I am a woman. Thanks for addressing my question. Well, thank you, Sasha, and I'm glad you were able to to join us here and propose your question. And anyone that's got any questions or ideas they'd like to propose, sometimes it might be harsh, might be, you know what I mean? I've got no issues. They're welcome. And thanks for that. I've got topic number 2, and I'll try not to drag along too much because we're getting close to the end of the program. Why are Syrians fleeing Assad's areas? This is why have I brought this topic up. There are huge lineups in immigration offices all over Syria. You can see that on social media. Half of the Syrian population displaced. The vast majority of them are out of Syria. Assad regime himself hasn't even been able to achieve recognition by the Syrian people. You have corruption, like Assad's relatives. Imagine his first cousin, who used to own 60% of the economy, his first cousin's son is driving a Ferrari in Los Angeles. His first cousin's son. You have his other cousins and relatives here in Syria, in Damascus, etc., driving around cars that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Corruption in the government and the loyalists, those who are close to the Assad regime. The corruption on the checkpoints. Theft. I have an example. I came to Syria in 2009, before the revolution. I came to Syria from Lebanon for a 4-day visit. On the border, before I even entered Syria, they wouldn't let me in unless I paid a bribe. And they kept on making signs. I tried to avoid them here, there. It's basically I had a decision. Either pay a bribe, or go back to Lebanon. You're not entering Syria. Imagine that. I'm a tourist coming to visit your country, spend money. They wouldn't let me in without a bribe. So that was my first impression. Coming into Syria, went to Damascus. I pulled out my phone. I'm a tourist. I've got a bum bag. I've got this stuff that makes it obvious. I'm very obvious. I'm a tourist. So what he does while I'm filming, I'm trying to film because there's Maghrib, Adhan on a big roundabout. I'll be honest, Damascus is beautiful, and I look forward to visiting it with liberation when it's liberated, inshallah. I've pulled out my phone to film. Bang! I get pretty much arrested and tackled by a security member. What are you doing? He says. You're filming here. Well, you're going to get you're going to get imprisoned. And starts making a big deal about me filming at pretty much what seemed to me a tourist attraction in the middle of Damascus. So the security grasp the grip they had on the people, choking them to death. Then you have, when we were driving up to Jabal Qasyun, one of the prime areas of Syria. It's a mountain just out on the outskirts of Damascus city, or in Damascus city. The taxi driver is driving us up. We see this big palace, huge palace. What's this? What's this? The palace, etc. The taxi driver acted as though he didn't even hear us. He kept driving up. When we got up to the top of the mountain, he says he was afraid to tell us what it was. We understood because it was the house of the Rais of Bashar al-Assad. So he's saying, this is the house. If I point out to you, I'll get arrested. Imagine that. Imagine people living in this environment. Corruption. The prisons are filled of Syrian people. Worried. Then you have the being forced with compulsory military conscription. So they're going to be pushed to the front lines and killed for Assad to protect his seat. For Russia to milk and steal the Syrian people's treasures. For Iran to establish a Shia state in Syria. So these people want to flee from needing to fight for Assad, Russia and Iran, where they don't believe in their cause. These youth are being forced to fight and die where they don't want to. They don't believe in this cause. Like I said, prisons and death. And their dignity, running away, trying to just keep their dignity. You go to the camps here in Idlib or northern Aleppo. People will say, I don't care, I've lost my house, my land, my wealth, everything. I'm living in a tent, but at least I've got my dignity. At least I've got my dignity. That's what they say. Imagine that. People said, death before losing my dignity. Yani al-maut wal al-madhalli. That was a cry, that was a chant. The Syrian people cried, and many of them put their chests out and died for that. You have people being able to raise their children in a religious environment, not worried that if their son goes to pray Jummah or goes to pray Fajr, that he's going to get disappeared. If they grew a beard or had some sort of religious lifestyle, that they'd be disappeared and killed. Like thousands upon thousands were exiled. The religious people were exiled. You go see Sednaya prison. It's before the revolution. Filled with thousands upon thousands because they were religious. You have the dire security situation. Pretty much every day you hear about an assassination, either attempt or assassination in Assad's areas. In Daraa, in Damascus, prominent figures. The problem is, you don't even know who's killing who. It's absolutely nuts. So the dire security situation. And last but not least, the dire economic situation. People are literally dying from hunger. So you have terrible economic situation, terrible security situation. You have people being forced to join the army to die for Assad, Russia and Iran, where they don't believe in their cause. You have people that are chucked in prisons and lost for life. You have people that just want their dignity. They're rushing to the migration office. They're rushing up through Tahrib, which is through up towards northern Aleppo and all sorts of areas, trying to run away. Even Alawis, Christians, Muslims, Shakkal al-Mlawal, leaving Assad's areas with whatever they can. Just their dignity, that's enough for them. This is the Syrian people's voice. So, Assad regime, people, you have European countries shamefully calling Syrians or trying to force Syrians to go back to Assad's areas where the Syrians will not. They will die and they will not go back. Even the ones, a very small amount that have gone back, have been imprisoned and have been killed, and many, many human rights organisations have brought this up and clarified this and brought these reports up for us to learn and understand. Basically, that's the situation in Assad's areas. This is why the people is fleeing Assad's areas. The dire situation. I'll try to answer my last question if I have a last question. We'll check it out. Just give me a moment. Got Sasha. Sasha's put a last quote, or last message. Yes, it is quite outstanding how the HTS-led government has excelled in infrastructure and public sector within the past year or so. This is also without no funding from other countries, right? The point about the funding, it's independently governed. Idlib is independently governed. The funding which may come into Idlib, it comes through humanitarian organisations, and they cooperate and collaborate directly with the Syrian Sovereign Government and the institutions here in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. So the humanitarian aid organisations, they're the ones that they, with cooperation with the government, assist and help the poor, the needy, the camps, etc. And their work's definitely appreciated. I've got the last. I'll take on the last maximum baddie. The last question, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Will the Assad regime attack soon, or will the opposition attack first? Important question. I've brought this up a number of times. I believe that there will be a military operation in the future. How long this will take, God knows, and by who will initiate it. This also needs to be answered. I know, as you can see, their revolution factions, their media wing are putting out Fatah al-Mubin, putting out, you could say, much media, trying to propose that they might be the ones that might initiate a battle. I know the Syrian revolution's goals and ambitions is for Damascus, their eyes on Damascus. So this is yet to be answered. There will be an operation in 6 months, 2 months, a year. Will Russia attack Ukraine? Will Russia attack Idlib? Will Russia attack northern Aleppo? Will Turkey attack the PKK? This is all yet to be answered. And will the opposition attack, or the Assad regime and Russians, etc.? This is yet to be answered. God knows best. I think we've run out of time. Jazakumullah khair. I've really enjoyed today's live show. I look forward to catching you guys in next week's Monday, 5 p.m. GMT, 8 p.m. Idlib time. I appreciate you guys sharing this content, sharing my accounts, liking, commenting, asking questions. All those who ask questions, Jazakumullah khair. I hope I was able to answer them. We'll catch you next Monday at 8 p.m. Idlib time, 5 p.m. GMT. It's your brother Ibrahim from Idlib, Syria. Look forward to seeing you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.